Ready? Hi.
Welcome to the Writing Well. We have Chrishaun here today.
Hello.
So, tell us a little bit about your background.
All right then. I between first of all, my name is Chrishaun Keller Hanna. Um, I am the author of the Alazar series now. Between 2001 and between 1997 and 2001, I was a ghostwriter for various licensed properties, most of them in the epic fantasy genre. I left that, became a gemologist. Then I went into technical writing, which I teach composition writing for freshmen and sophomore college. Then I switched over to technology full on, and I work for a hosting platform here in Austin, Texas. And I also do process documentation for the arts. And I am starting to write fiction again. And my first release is actually this month in the Elazar universe.
That's exciting.
It is. I am very excited about that.
So, how has your writing process evolved?
Oh, it's evolved, kind of like growing up. When you're young, and I've been writing, and you're going to hear this a lot. I've been writing since I was a kid. I literally have been.
Most writers have
Right? And when you're a kid, you think, I'm going to write this story, and you write it from beginning to end. You don't give any thought to structure, any thought to plot. You just pretty much fanfic your favorite books over and over and over again. And with each iteration, it's the characters are different. First is the characters the way you wish they had done it. Then you add characters when that doesn't work. And then you add your environment before you know you have your own universe. That's kind of how Alazar evolved. And as I started taking writing gigs, I started to learn about plot and structure and characters and the hero's journey. And that switched over to technical writing where you must have a skeleton form outline.
Right.
And you must fill in all the spaces, and then you clean it up and make sure that people can follow it. I was exposed to beta readers before they were cool. And now that I'm doing my own writing again, and I'm under no one's deadline but my own, I'm finding that technical writing style, at least having the frame outline, the structure, and then having that 12-year-old girl, I'm going to write a story and plow through it. A technique, a combination of the two is working the best for me.
Yeah. It sounds like that. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me because when I was first writing, well, really, I was a story imaginer.
Mm-hmm.
And I started actually writing them down when one of my good friends in sixth grade, she was really into writing. And so we sort of ended up with a little writing circle. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, okay, I'll write down what's in my head. Sure, I can do that. But for me, like I have to go through what would be considered developmental edits in my head for like months before I know the story well enough to actually write out a structure.
Mm-hmm.
Because the characters evolve and the story evolves, and not nothing that's important changes, but the layers of complexity get added.
Right.
So it takes a lot of time for me.
I try not to developmental edit in my head because I will never finish work that way.
Mm.
Um, Mind if I walk you through the process step by step?
Yeah, please do.
Right then. I usually start with a flat outline, the character, what they want, who's going against them, and then I go through the arc. First, a major flaw, how that flaw keeps them from doing what they want. Their first attempt with their major flaw in full gear, they fail. How they recover it, do it again until we have big yes, big no, big yes, really bad no, and then rebirth and victory and new life. Right,
Right.
typical hero's journey. I plot all of those out, and it helps me. But it helps me find out where the high points are, know
Mm-hmm.
where I have to bridge them. Once I have that, I take each section and I start writing beats. This is for me a chapter beat. I draw another little hero's journey within it. So there's some
Mm-hmm.
tension, and then there is Did they get it? No. And or yes, but I always make sure that they fail more than they succeed. And this is usually a paragraph or two.
Okay.
And this is where I suspect you would have the developmental edits in your head, because this is where you smooth out the story. And those great ideas or those complexities are usually pop out and put into a more kind of like an artist does, all those great ideas. And some of those things will never make it into this book or any other book. Some of them will just be little entries into my world's Wikipedia, which I call
Yeah.
my book Bible. And some things will become germs of ideas for another series. But I try to stick to the story as best I can during this process. Once I have my beats out, it takes about 2 or 3 days. I take the first section, I set it in front of me, I read it through. I take about 5 minutes to write longhand, kind of pre-writing, get those muscles warmed up. And then I write what's in my head. It doesn't matter if it was on the page, in the outline, in the beats, whatever. I see if my characters and my plot are smarter than, I see if my subconscious is smarter than my characters and my plot.
Right.
And I just let them go where they're going to go.
Right.
And the first draft of any story is supposed to be crappy. That is its job. And so I turn off spell check. I turn off anything that's going to tell me I'm writing wrong. If I don't remember things, I put it in a bracket and I say, this is supposed to be their name and I forgot it. Or this is the slang term that I used in this other story. And I just keep on going and I don't look back. I don't self-edit. I don't correct. I don't do any of that until the entire book is done. So I literally just go, finish up that section, set it aside, pick up the next one, and keep on writing, because you can edit bad pages. There are editors that get paid a lot of money to do that. You cannot edit a blank page. You cannot edit an incomplete book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is the part I was telling you earlier, where when I teach this and I tell people, turn off spell check, do not hit backspace, use write or die, whatever it takes you to go through that and finish it, they look at me and tell me, I'm going to slit your throat. You're crazy. They tell me these things because you want to go back and edit, right?
Right.
But no, what you really want is to finish.
Yeah.
Because perfection comes in revisions. This is just getting a book out there, getting a book out of your mind and out of your heart onto the page.
So have you noticed that with doing this process over and over, that you end up having fewer things to fix when you go through and revise?
Yes, I do. I do notice that for several reasons. Number one, I instinctively know what part of the story I am, so I know what beats I should be hitting. And it seems that the more I know my characters, the more they seem to understand where they're supposed to be in the story. My characters are very smart. I do refer to them in the third person because sometimes they will go off and do things I didn't imagine. And if I'm telling myself the truth, it's because they know themselves a little bit better. They're doing things in character. So when we are all on the same page, it flows better. It's when nowadays is when I introduce a new character or I'm in a new environment that it starts to become clunkier and it slows down the process. But let's say I'm talking about Michael Lee and Manny Fala, who are my flagship characters. Those stories go fast because they know, I know, the world knows how this is supposed to go, and we just do it. The runners, which I'm working on today, is more difficult because I don't know them.
Yeah.
As well.
So starting a new world would be much slower than working on book 2 in a series, for example.
Yes, it is much slower. This 10,000 word novella has taken longer to write, about 3 weeks, than any of my 50,000 word books in the M2 series. Just because we're dealing with a different economic class. We're dealing with more working class people. And we're also dealing with more of a criminal element than we were in them too, which is these folks are higher level nobles, if you wanted to call it that way. They're more of a nobles, and they have more autonomy and more wealth and be able to do things.
Right.
I'm familiar with that one more than the working class folks in Alizar. And so this has been challenging, but the process is the same.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And once I have finished a full write-up, I leave it alone for a couple of weeks. So I'm separate from it.
Mm-hmm.
Watch with clean eyes. I usually take that time to either revise another work or to start on another smaller work. When I come back to it, I separate it into quarters and I check my plot again. I check the hero's journey, making sure that they're hitting all the beats.
Okay.
And this is where revision and perfectionism and spell check and Hemingway editor comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is where I make it smooth, and this is where all the complexities, making sure it's consistent. This is where you make it perfect. This is where you polish.
Right. Right. So what's your I guess this would be more of a world building question. So how do you before you start writing, how do you figure out what world building elements you need for that story, and how do you do the research for it?
I'm going to tell you the truth. My world building comes during my revisions.
Okay.
Okay. The Runners is another perfect example. These are working class people in Alizar. I don't really know how they live, how they communicate, what jobs would be available to them, because I was dealing with people in nobility.
Mm-hmm.
So what I knew what country they were in and what nationality were the major players. I had all of that down, and the rest of it I had no clue. So I made my outline. I talked about what her goal was, and then I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
I just wrote, and whatever came to mind is what came to mind, and I just kept on going with it.
Okay.
I set it aside. I came back to it, and I read about what she did. She talked about when it was outside and she was raining. A flood is the exciting event in this story. She went out and she danced because that's how Deveron get their power, because they're a water tribe. That's how they get their power. And in the desert, she had missed the water on her face, so she did a traditional dance. That was plucked out and that became world building.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that she's in a desert land and most of the families are clans. They call themselves the head of household, clan. And I pulled that out, and that became part of the world building for this area.
Mm-hmm.
The particulars about having a token that holds you to this world, and how and why someone would want to do it, how and why a family would not want someone to hold on to their life on Earth, or hold or force them to stay on Earth. Why would someone do that? Why would somebody go through this act? What that looks like. I wrote about it a little bit while I was just typing through, but now that I had time to revise, I picked up on the little clues that my subconscious just placed in my manuscript, and then I took all of those and I refined them then.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to overthink it when I'm actually writing it. When I revise and I comb through that information, that's when I connect the dots. That's when I start writing smaller articles about these things and put it in my book Bible. That's world building. I do it during revising. And it also, world building during revising prevents you from sabotaging yourself through research.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Because if you do need to do a piece of research, you make a note and you do it when you're revising.
Right. After your completed work is done.
Yeah. That makes sense.
It took
so
me
do you,
years
when
to
you're
figure
going
out.
through revising, do you like make a a timeline and like a list of the details to make sure that everything is consistent all the way through?
I cheat with that because most of my 50,000 word stories, they happen within the course of 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
They always do. And my novellas are usually within the course of 36 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that happens within 36 hours. So it's a more chronological timeline, and it keeps,
Right.
I know where everyone is. And that's something that I realized that I had to do if I was going to keep all the points together.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I picked this up from Janet Ivanovich, who writes the Stephanie Plum novels.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie Plum, she always tells you what day it is, and she always goes through the same routines every day, so you know where in where in the timeline she is.
Right.
And John Ivanovich said that she started to do this. I think originally the first 10 or 15, they all happened within a week. So as you know, Monday Stephanie does this, Tuesday Stephanie does this, Wednesday Ranger does this. So you would
Right.
know where everybody was. It's a great mechanic, and when done well, it's almost invisible.
Right. Because I mean, when you know your character's daily routines, those aren't the parts that are important to the story unless for some reason those routines need to be broken.
Right.
And then but it helps you know what you're doing, because if they're making dinner and they have this epic realization about something, you can show the inner dialogue that they're having about that while they're chopping vegetables for salad or whatever. And like that, okay, they're chopping vegetables for salad, they do that every day like as part of their dinner preparation, so like we know they're at home.
Right. It automatically brings that visualization of where they are. If
Right.
it's
So you
the
don't have to repeat
Scarpellis.
your descriptions of a place because you
Right.
already you're referring back to something you showed before.
Right. Who was that? The Scarpelli, I think the name of the character was. She does a lot of, it's a thriller series, and she does a lot of Italian cooking, and she does all her she thinks through the case while she's cooking.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I could remember who that was.
It'll come back.
It will come back. But Patricia Cornwell, Cornwell, that's who the author is. And that's the Scarpetta series, and she does the same thing. When she's cooking, she's usually what the process is, what her kitchen looks like, and she does that in the evenings, and it gives you a sense of space, a sense of place, and where you are in the story.
Mm-hmm. So how is it different writing for yourself than when you were writing as a ghostwriter?
Because mentally I'm a rebel and a bohemian wild child by nature, knowing that someone is depending on me usually is a hard motivation. I
Yeah.
know that they have placed their trust in me, so I will finish this. And if I don't, I have misplaced their trust, which is hard for me. I like people to trust me, and I want to give them reason to continue to. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's easier for me to do that. When it's myself, it's like, oh, I've got time. I could do this. Or I tell myself, you're going to do this. And my head says, nope, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do something fun. I'm going to have breakfast. I'm going to watch YouTube. I'm going to do Netflix. And I have to find ways to convince myself that it's still a matter of trust.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a matter of, you promised yourself that in 1 year you'll be writing full time.
Yeah.
So that means that you have to have these products out. You have to have these stories written. You need to tell your story. You need to do your website or your mailing list. All of these things are ways to make sure that I trust myself.
Yeah.
And it's a concept that I'm struggling with because you don't really consider, for some reason, at least for me, the things that other people find more important tend to have priority.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a nurturer by nature, but my things take the backseat. And I'm working on trying to make them a higher priority without feeling like I'm being arrogant or letting people down.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I get that feeling a lot too. It's much easier for me to do something that's helping someone else specifically than to do something that's gonna be or feel like it's just for me. Like a lot of my stories have started out as just me daydreaming about something that I wanted to think about. And it's a hard transition to think about how is this work of fiction helping someone else? I mean, it is. I've learned all my best life lessons from fiction, but it's hard to think of it that way.
Mm-hmm. It
Yeah.
really, really is. So, what has helped me is doing this like like it's a job. 8 p.m. to midnight, I clock in to Alazar Incorporated
Mm-hmm.
as their lead writer. And
Yeah.
right now, I'm a very lazy employee. And I think of it as a startup. I'm a CEO of my own startup. And I am building the skills. Right now, I've joined what's called the 365 Club on Facebook, which encourages you to write every day. And I'm averaging somewhere between 1,200 words a day in that 3 hours. If I do sprints, I know that time can be filled up at 3,000 words a day. So I'm working to the point where I'm doing 3,000 words a day from 8 to midnight.
Yeah.
And an hour of revision also within that time. And it's a struggle because my brain wants to go into so many different directions. And it's a matter of discipline. It's a
Yeah.
matter of training. It's getting in your butt into the chair and your body learning. If it's 8 p.m., I really should be writing. My body should
Yeah.
be in a position where I am writing. And if it isn't, I'm going to let Chrishaun know that we should be writing. I'm not there yet. We need to be watching Netflix or playing a video game. But it's
Yeah.
coming day by day.
Yeah. It takes time to train. I had like an epic breakthrough when I was listening to one of the self-publishing podcast episodes where Garrett mentioned as
Mm-hmm.
a side comment that was not related to what they were actually talking about at all. He was like, "Oh yeah, I like have let people watch me live while I write." I was like,
Yes.
I need to do that. That is going to make my like writing so much less stressful. So I started doing it, and nobody watches these videos for me at all because I don't I turn the sound off, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just me screen sharing what's on my screen, and it's public. But like that accountability for me, someone could be watching me right now and expecting me to be putting words on the page. So if I'm not putting words on the page, I could be letting someone down. And so that makes that getting the first draft out, like it's never, because I don't write in order.
Mm-hmm.
I can't write in order. I tried, it doesn't work.
Some people are like that.
So I do a lot of the stuff that you were talking about with the hero's journey. That's a lot of the high points come to me first.
Right.
And then it takes me a while to fill in those gaps, and it's a lot of like what if questions or why. And I have this one series that I'm working on right now, and it's actually the first scene that I got in my head is the plot of the fourth book.
Oh.
And I realized that in order for anything in that book to make sense, I need to write about their parents and their grandparents. which is like 3 more books and like another 4 short stories.
See, I do the same thing.
And I'm like, I can't publish a series from book 4 when you can't read book 4. I mean, I guess you could read book 4 by itself. But you're going to get so much more out of it if you start at book 1.
Right.
So I have to juggle putting out the scenes that, like, there are scenes where I know exactly what happens, and I will get these urges to write, and I want to let myself write when I have those urges, because I get my best words on the page at those times. But I also want to train myself to write when it's writing time.
Right.
And so I do the screen sharing, the live broadcast screen sharing, but I do it standing up, and I have the sound off because I'm listening to music
Right.
without headphones, because I'm standing and I want to be able to move while I'm typing.
Right.
And that has really, really helped me to be like in writing fiction mode. Because when I'm not writing fiction, usually I'm sitting down. Usually I have like outlines, and it's much clearer what I'm trying to say because I have a specific point I'm trying to make, or I have a specific, there's a specific reason for writing whatever it is I'm writing. Like if it's a blog post, I did a blog post the other day about the anatomy of a dragon. It's like I needed to know in order to like have this scene work in my story, I needed to know how much blood could be taken from a dragon without the dragon being injured. Like the same way that if you go to a lab and they take a certain amount, like 1 vial or 2 vials or whatever it is, like there's a way of calculating how much blood you can take and have it not be harmful.
Right. I do that during the revisions. I literally say, and he took out, hey, how many pints do we need? And then close that bracket up, and then I make it up. I do. I base it on the human body. I say, okay, we need 6 pints of blood in order to live. Okay, they need 60 pints. Done. We're done. Another thing, when you were talking about how to understand what's going on with him, you need to understand his parents and grandparents. Scott R. Green, he does something at the Night Side series, which is a wonderful private eye, paranormal private eye pulp type novel. His power, his gifts, and why people are trying to kill him are based upon his mother. And you know nothing about his mother at all. Matter of fact, neither does he. So you might want to set it up to where you find out more about the parents and grandparents as we go forward, instead of going backwards, starting the first book with a bunch of questions. Why are these people trying to kill me because of things that other generations did? Don't know, but you might want to try to escape now. Okay. And that's the story.
Yeah.
And then
that could have worked for that one. That's how I'm doing it for a different series.
Right.
But this one, it makes more sense to go in chronological order simply because of the bad guy.
Oh.
He's a very mysterious bad guy, and he's very evil, like uber evil. Like you take Criminal Minds and the bad guys on that show, and you put him into a fantasy world where he's a necromancer and an illusion mage. So he can make you see anything he wants you to see, and he can bring back the dead. And he's evil.
He sounds fun.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to write.
Then you might want to consider interstitial, which is a word that I learned from my editor the other week. Interstitial, which is these italicized stories within the story. You bring in all the information, you break the chapter, you open a new chapter, and then you talk about the bad guy. Stephen King did this with it and with Dreamcatchers. between the chapters, he would have a small part where back in 1964, how this one kid was found missing, and a lot of people were talking about how they saw this one clown. Or in Dreamcatcher, not too long after during World War II, the Japanese prisoners of war were tasked with clearing up this red moldy plant in the fields, and it caused a lot of deaths, and they never really talked about it because it was considered casualties of war. And it will just be a small complete story, a couple of thousand words, that gives more depth to the dangers that the people in the modern I can't talk, sorry about my English, modern world faces.
Yeah.
And if you haven't noticed, another big part of my process is that I read voraciously.
Yeah, me too. I realized, actually, I started a book club because I realized that I had stopped reading fiction because I was reading so much nonfiction because I had so much to learn about business and publishing and all of that. And I was like, this is unacceptable. I need to be reading at minimum one book a month. So I put together a book club just for that, just to hold myself accountable to it and to force myself to read outside of my comfort zone in terms of genres that I wouldn't necessarily go looking for books in otherwise. So I always pick books that I think are going to be interesting, but I pick books in every genre instead of just science fiction and fantasy and romance.
Right. I've decided, I started doing it a few weeks ago, that one of my 8 p.m. to midnight is reading. Because that is just as important as writing. So I finished the Scott R. Green anthology, Tales of the Night Side. I just finished that one, and I'm going to be reading A Man Called Ove, O-V-E, which is literary fiction.
Yeah.
And mainly because I want to see how prose is put together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alizar is a very visual world as well as a dangerous one. And I have the danger and intrigue part down, but I would like to learn how people paint a scene to show how beautiful this place is and how very careful you must be around such beauty, because before you know it, there's a plant with its teeth in your neck.
Right.
I love the look you just gave. She was like, did she say plant? Yes, I did.
That's another benefit to reading poetry too, and to practicing writing poetry. I was just talking about this yesterday. Where you get that when you're writing a poem, you're trying to pick exactly the right words to show exactly the right image or exactly the right feeling for whatever it is you're talking about. And it tends to be very concise, but you're also paying attention to the cadence and the rhythm and the musicality of which words you use and why you're using the words that you're using. Like, are you describing something that's beautiful and peaceful and calm, but using language that's sharp and jagged and abrupt because there's something about this peaceful and calm thing that you don't really believe? Or, like thinking about how it's, why is it parallel and why is it opposite for whatever it is you're trying to do.
Right.
So, yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about. I usually only write poetry when I have a emotion that I want to let go of. Like, I'm really mad for this really stupid reason, so I'm going to go write a poem so that I can stop being mad about this stupid thing.
I do the same thing, but what I do is I drop it in Alizar. One of my characters, I do have a Mary Sue, and she is the character I write in when I need to let stuff out. So I end up writing a short story about how she's facing it and doing what I wish I could be able to, but I
Mhm.
can't because I live in polite society. And so I reckon that once I become bigger and I can get away with this, I might publish them all under like my personal neuroses fantasy series or something.
Make it a collection that like is a special thing that people who are super fans of the world can get when they sign up for your email list.
Right.
Hey, by the way, I have this thing. You
When
can read it if you want to.
yes, when folks piss me off, McQueen jumps into action. See what's bugging her this week.
It could be a fun thing to put on your blog, actually.
Yeah. McQueen deals with ... Goodness. Oh, that may be a thing. By the way, Garrett, he was talking about Garrett's Twitch page. His username is 410 Bluff, FORTIN BUFF. And it's really great because it's literally just him and about 12 of us watching him type.
Yeah.
And we talk about other things like Chick Corea, his electric band. We talk about other series, the one that he's working on, other ones he's written, where he's finally going to move to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interactive, fun, and it keeps him and us accountable.
Right.
I
So
absolutely.
do you write while you're watching him?
No, he's usually on when I'm at my full-time job.
Okay.
So I work my full-time job while watching him. And I'm looking forward to the point when I can work write when he is writing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a goal.
Yeah.
But I'm also considering doing the 8 to midnight. Let's sit in front of a camera and type. Oh my goodness.
I don't know. It's a lot of writers I think would find that very intimidating because it means, at least the way that I do it, it would mean that your rough draft is visible to the world in its horrible, unpolished, disconnected form.
Well, that's
But
the
for
thing.
me,
Once again,
for
the
me,
first draft is supposed to be crappy.
well, yeah, but for me, the making it be public is like when I first had that idea, I felt this enormous sense of relief.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, I don't have to stress out about putting words on the page because if I'm doing it for someone else so that they're watching, then I just have to do it. And like, I can't fight with myself about it because it's not for me, it's for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So that works really well when I actually do it,
Right.
which hasn't been happening lately because I'm moving.
Oh no! Wow. Are you moving across town or across the country?
So I sort of have been living split between my parents' place in California and my grandmother's place in Indiana for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's been all very complicated. I've just kept my permanent residence with my parents for simplification of driver's licenses and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm moving back to help with my brother. He has reactive attachment disorder and bipolar and stuff like that.
Right.
And with my mom and my dad both working and me working, like between the three of us working, my dad works from home, my mom works not from home, and I work from home. So between the three of us, we'll be able to like take care of one kid.
Right. How old is your kiddo?
He's 12.
Oh, and that's a very important time to be with him.
Yeah. So I'm actually really excited. I'm gonna have him I'm gonna have him help me out with a whole bunch of stuff, and it's gonna be like fun little games to him. Like, hey, learn everything you can about the Einstein-Rosen theory and explain it to me so I can understand it. use your internet Google research skills that you need to build for being a real person. Yeah. So it's going to be good, but it means I have to ship everything that I had at my grandmother's house over to California. So I have one more load to take to the post office, and then I fly on Tuesday, and then I have to unpack and adjust to a different time zone.
Oh, wow.
So.
And that'll take about 3 months.
Right.
I did Virginia. I did the Hampton Roads, Norfolk, Virginia, transition to San Diego, California, and it took a long time to adjust to Pacific time because that's just very early.
I think my timing is actually going to be pretty much the same. So, like right now, I can't sleep when the sun is up. So this is sort of I wake up several hours before I get up typically, and I've been trying to get myself to get up when I wake up because I think that would be better for me to get everything done. But it hasn't been happening, and I stopped pushing it because the past few weeks I've been staying up until midnight and like getting out of bed around 9.
Oh.
Which is like weird for me because I wake up several hours before that. So when I go to California on Tuesday, I think it's going to just magically be perfect because 9 o'clock where I am now is East Coast time. So 9 o'clock is really 6 o'clock and midnight is really 9. So I'll just go to bed at 9 and get up at 6 and my sleep schedule will be exactly the same. And like, I'll have solved my problem of like trying to get up when I wake up.
Right.
So
I hope that works for you.
I hope it does. I really hope it does. We'll find out.
Okay.
Come Wednesday, we will find out. Yeah. So do your characters name themselves and introduce themselves to you, or do you sort of have to pull out them when you're...
It depends on the character. Some of them, like Trent Seto and Duskane Cole, who we call Duke, those two were, I put something out on Facebook. I'm like, hey, I need 2 character names. Can y'all help a girl out? And I get all of these suggestions, and I pick the ones I like. Vandersnoot Lee was one of them. And those are mostly characters that I'm pulling whole cloth. Now, when a character is based on someone I know, what I do is I ask them to name them.
Oh, cool.
And I come up to them, it's like I refer to as I'm wrapping a character around you, which means that it isn't quite you, but I'm using your framework to build out this character. And I tell them a little bit about them, about the storyline, not only in the book I'm working at, but hopefully in the future, I'll let them ask all the questions they want about the character. And then they gave me a name. That's how I got Amani, who we call Manny Follow, the director of the nursery and director of M2 and Alexar. That's how we got Grant Lee, the Inquisitor Prime for the Sora region, and Ethereum and Alexar. That's how we got Duskane. Actually, Duskane was named for another character, and I pulled that character into this one. And I really like that. And it allows folks to learn the story of Alexar. So it's part marketing and it's part getting folks involved in the process.
Yeah.
And sharing with them my story of building out this universe. And I really enjoy it that way. It makes it personal for me. It helps me also learn who these people are.
Yeah.
Because when Manny has to do something, I wonder, what would this guy do in this situation? And I think about it and it makes it easier.
Yeah.
That's another part of the writing coming faster because I really don't know Duskane or Trent right now, my main characters in the Runner series. So it's making it slower. But the characters themselves come to me fully formed. I can see them. I can hear their voices. I know pretty much what house they're from. There's
Right.
there's 5 houses in Alizar, and they're nations, and they're very distinct. I have a steampunk one. I have more like woodsy, kind of wood elves, but in human form. One, I have one that's full of pirates and airship pirates. And I have a more ethereal, historical book learning type of right wing conservative type.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have this technology based, everything must be beautiful and glitzy for the camera type
Mm-hmm.
people. And when a character comes to me, they usually introduce themselves through their house. So I know what kind of basic actions there are. Then I drop them in this and I start my first draft, and they tell me more as they go along.
Yeah.
Um, I like, and that's also why I refer to them in third person, because the more I do that, the more they tell me about themselves.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense.
This is also related to finding out what their major malfunction is, because
Yeah.
all drama is based on a flaw that they have that they're trying to get over, or a flaw that they have to learn that they have.
Right.
Right. In Deuce Kane's case, in Duke Cole's case in the Runner series, she's a hothead.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't take the time to think about the situations she's in. She just charges into stuff, or she reacts without thinking, and it causes more trouble than it needs to.
Right.
But because she is good at what she does and she has a special power, people tolerate her. It's kind of like House. Like, he has a lot of flaws,
Mm-hmm.
and he makes it through life because no one else can do what he does. But the drama comes when people have to negotiate or navigate through his neuroses and his, I'm trying not to cuss, but
Yeah. Yeah.
let's just say his douchebaggery. And that's where true drama comes from. Overcoming or even realizing that you have a problem.
Yeah. And then trying to fix it, and then not not being able to remember that that's a thing that you do all the time. Right? Like, there's always something that you do that you're trying to not do, that you forget that you're trying not to do it at some point because something else is more important, or you're thinking about something else, and so you revert backwards. And then like 3 weeks later you're like, oh, I did that again, darn it.
Right. Or in Deuce Gaines' case, she likes who she is, but she doesn't quite realize that her tendency to run into stuff is the reason why she's having these issues and why she's always frustrated with the world.
Right.
And people are always trying to fix it or fix her, and she's bucking against it. If she took the time to listen, which is what everyone's trying to do, it would go easier for her. But the drama comes in the fact that she absolutely likes herself too much to be changed fundamentally in one fell swoop. So she has to learn the lessons.
Right.
And each book is a lesson. Yeah, it is. So.
Yeah, like I said earlier, everything that I know about life,
I've learned from
everything I know about life, I've learned from fiction. Absolutely true. Yeah.
And it kind of humbles me that in time people will say the same thing about our books.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because we put the lessons that we learn into our writing. Like, our characters are exploring the aspects of an issue that either we have or that we don't have, and so we're trying to understand how someone else would go through it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're learning as much about life by writing the books as people who are reading it will learn.
Yes, at least that's the hope.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your structure and your lovely insights. I've had so much fun today.
This has been great. Thank you so much. And I would really like to drop in from time to time and just so we can discuss how this is going.
Yeah, yeah, that would be wonderful. Do you have a place where people can find you and your writing?
Yes, Alazar.com. That's ALLAZAR.com.
Perfect.
And from there, you can sign the mailing list, which is going through a little bit of transition because soon I'm going to be offering the Alazar Gazetteer. And with the release of the first run of novel, Flood Level, I'm going to be sharing more insights about the universe and about what Duskane and Trent do for a living. And it should be fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. You have a good day.